Hello, everybody, and welcome to our introductory webinar to TestRail, TestRail 101. Today we'll be taking a look at some of the core features of TestRail that enable testing teams to streamline their testing efforts and deliver high-quality releases on time. So during this webinar, I'll be using some slides to give kind of a basic overview of TestRail's functionality, and then go over some of the key terms and general structure of how projects work inside of TestRail. I'm gonna switch over to a live demonstration of some of the key actions and workflows for TestRail users, including how to plan and organize your reusable test cases, and how to efficiently execute your tests using milestones, tests, runs, and plans. And then towards the end, I'll show off some of the reporting and metrics features built into TestRail. And then we're going to go through some of the different customization and administration features available to administrators. And then at the end of the webinar, again, should we have time, we're going to go ahead and do some live Q&A from questions asked throughout the presentation. So if everyone's buckled in, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so why do people use TestRail? When people start out testing, they'll often begin by either not tracking their testing at all, or by keeping a record of testing objectives in like a spreadsheet or a similar other type of repository. What people quickly discover though, is that managing the testing in spreadsheets or directly in something like Jira, for example, doesn't scale very well once the testing starts to get a little bit more complicated. So people choose TestRail to manage their testing because it checks all the right boxes. It's super fast and streamlined so you can stay focused on the testing at hand. It's flexible enough to facilitate any kind or size of testing you want to do, whether you use a waterfall style approach, agile testing, or even continuous testing with a heavy emphasis on automation. Our customers range from small businesses with a single user to large corporations with thousands of users running literally millions of tests each day. Often, people start using TestRail because it's easy to pick up and use without any formal training, which also makes it easy to get your team onboarded. And then finally, TestRail comes with a number of powerful features like integrations with requirements and management tools like Jira, an extensive API, and advanced options around customizations and reporting. So let's start with a brief overview of how test artifacts work in TestRail. So projects are the most basic unit of architecture in TestRail. Typically, each of your products would have their own project in TestRail, although sometimes it makes sense to break your projects up by team instead. That's entirely up to you. Within projects, you can categorize TestRail's features into two main functional areas. You've got test planning and also test execution. So to start planning your testing, you'll begin with test cases. Test cases are going to be just the most basic building block of the testing workflow inside of TestRail. Test cases live in sections, which can also live inside of test suites, depending on your project structure. And that's what you use to kind of plan your testing. For example, you might have a section with that's authentication and then tests inside of it that are like test your login screen. So different things like different ways of organizing it like that. Once you have set up some scenarios that you want to test, you can add test runs based on those cases. This is where you'll mark the status of each of the tests that you've defined as you begin your testing. You'll add results, comments, and then also link to any bug reports that you might run into as you are executing these tests as needed. You can create multiple individual test runs or add multiple test runs into a test plan which is especially useful when you need to run the same set of tests against different configurations, like different browser types or different operating systems. You can also create milestones, which allow you to plan and track the progress of multiple test runs and test plans involved in a single release, sprint, or other unit of time you want to measure your testing against. And then finally, there is the reporting and the just reports and metrics that you can find in TestRail to give you the ability to drill down into various aspects of your test repository and test execution history across the length of your entire project. All right, so now let's go ahead and just dive into our instance here, and let's go ahead and get started. So here we've got a brand new project that we just set up. We're just going to be using kind of the most basic versions of each of the entities in TestRail today, just for demonstration purposes. But let's go ahead and jump over to our test cases. I'm going to very quickly create a brand new test case here. We are going to be using the test case steps template today, but let me go ahead and enter in some of this information really quickly. Now, for this demonstration, we're going to just say we work on a team that's developing a messaging app and is going to use TestRail to manage that testing. So depending on the size of your application or your team structure, you may track testing across a few different projects. Many teams create TestRail projects that match the way they've set up projects in a different tool, like a project management tool like Jira. Although some teams prefer to have one single TestRail project that would track everything across all of their activities. All right, so as I mentioned previously, the testing workflow in TestRail starts with your test cases. This is where you define what needs to be tested and any specifics that go along with that. So test cases consist of two main components. You've got your title up at the top and then all of the fields inside. So in the fields, when you're looking at the test case creation page, fields are kind of divided into this top section and the bottom section. Generally, the fields at the top are going to help you organize and categorize your tests. This makes it really easy to kind of sort your tests by different priorities, by different test types. It also can help you filter out certain things. So if you're looking for tests that are specific to a different, like a specific type of automation or they're manual, you can easily filter out those tests when you've got that information filled out. Alternatively, you can also find all of your functional tests, say, very easily. Towards the bottom, this is where you're actually defining the kind of meat and potatoes of the test case itself. So the fields at the bottom are more specifically how to, or like what are going to be guiding the testers to get to the end result of this test. So it's going to give the preconditions of what they need to have in place before the test is run, and then the individual steps depending on how you've got your test cases set up for what they're going to need to do in order to actually run this test. One thing I do want to mention here are our test templates. So templates allow you to customize how your test cases are laid out and which fields are present when you are using or when you're creating these test cases. So one of the most popular default test templates is the test steps. That's what we're using here. And this is where you can kind of explicitly define each individual step and expected result that you need to verify during testing. And then assign each step its own status. So when I'm going through to execute a test case that's using this test case steps template, I'll be able to set a pass or fail for each individual step. If you kind of just want something a little bit more basic, you just want to add the general description, steps, and expected results, you can use this test case text template. So this just gives you the very basic, just large text fields for your steps and expected result. This is, if you're using a much more simplified testing system, you're not going through and defining each individual step, or you don't need to add results to each individual step, this is going to usually be a better option for you, just a little bit simpler to use. And then beyond that, we also have out of the box the exploratory session template. This is really good if you're doing some kind of exploratory or user acceptance testing. So this kind of allows you to define a mission or charter where you're kind of saying like, this is what we need to make sure is working properly. And then the goals of, however you want to go about actually, working through that. So this is kind of a little bit more freeform, a little bit more, it's just great for exploratory testing because you're just kind of defining what you want to get done rather than explicitly stating what, would define a pass-fail state. But as I mentioned, we are going to be using the test case steps template for our examples today. So let's go ahead and go back here. Whichever type of template you use, all of our text fields are rich text and support markdown editing. You can insert tables and you can embed images or like animated GIF files if you prefer. So let's go ahead and finish adding this test case. And that's our first test case set up in the system. So we just saw what it looks like to add a full test case itself. But what if you need to just kind of quickly outline what tests you need to run for a new feature or component? So you can use this add case button that's kind of directly here. And this is going to just allow you to enter the title. You don't actually need to go through and fill out all of the details in one go. So this is really good for very high level brainstorming. So you can just kind of quickly create the different test cases you're needing, you're wanting to set up without having to go through and define each one and potentially lose your train of thought as you're kind of trying to define what different tests need to be made. Once you do have a couple of new test cases that have been added in this way, you can you can select all of them and then bulk edit using this edit option up here. And this will let you kind of redefine all of the different aspects of these test cases. So if I want to, I can switch these over to like a functional type. I can also switch the template to the test case steps template. And since these are very similar, I can just, react to message with emoji and recipient sees emoji. And that way, these are basically testing the same thing, just with different, different emotes. So we're going to leave that like that, and that's going to give us everything we need inside of this test case here. Go ahead and update these two test cases. So the quick add function like that is very simple. So you can just kind of jump in really easily, kind of create the structure and add new tests as needed when you're running through there. Finally, what if you already have a bunch of test cases that you want to import from like another tool or from directly in a spreadsheet? This is a super common scenario for teams using TestRail. So let's take a quick look at how this works in practice. So we do have the option to import. You can import from XML or CSV. XMLs tend to have to be in a very specific format. So we're going to use our CSV that's going to be the most universally accessible to most users. Actually, before we jump in there, here's a quick look at what this file looks like. So this is the CSV that I'm going to be importing here. As you can see, some of these test cases actually take up multiple rows. And that's because we are using this to import test cases that have multiple steps. So when you are using the multiple individual steps template, you will need to have each of the steps and expected results kind of defined on their own row. And then when you're doing the import, as I'll demonstrate in a moment, you can define and let the system know that that's how this is formatted. If you're just doing kind of the more traditional test case text where it's not, you're just defining one set of steps and one expected result, then this, you don't need to have this be quite so detailed, but for the one that we're using here, we're going to go ahead and import this file. All right, and we're going to leave this import to blank. This is what section you want to import these test cases to. Inside of our CSV, we actually have sections set up as this feature column. So we are going to use that to map to our different sections inside of our system. This is a Google Docs version formatted, so we're going to do that. And we're also going to define test case steps here. Let's go ahead and bump through. We are going to, as I mentioned, specify to the system that we are using multiple rows, and we are going to use the title to determine when a new test case is starting. So anytime it sees a unique title, that's when it is going to start a new test case. And now let's go ahead and we're just going to switch everything over here. This is a kind of quick and easy way to automatically map the columns over to your system here. As I mentioned, we do have the feature column, which we are going to switch over to section, and that's going to automatically create a sections for each of the different types of test case we've got here. Let's go ahead and keep moving everything down here. And that's everything we need. Let's go ahead and go next here. On this page, this is where you can map the different field values that are found inside of the spreadsheet to the relevant field values inside of TestRail. So as you can see, we were using a number system in that spreadsheet for our priorities, whereas TestRail uses kind of the more specific words. So we are going to kind of define which of these priorities is actually relevant to the priorities that we've got in the system here. And everything else looks like it's ready to go. And now we get a quick preview of what this looks like. So it looks like our test cases are coming in properly. There's 9 test cases found in the CSV file. So that's all looking good. Let's go ahead and import. So we did add 3 sections and 9 cases. This configuration file can be really useful. So all of the setup that we just did, all of the field mapping and column mapping, you can save this configuration file. And if you're doing more than one import from the same source, from the same type of spreadsheet, you can use this configuration file to save time whenever you're doing another import. You just load up the configuration file at the beginning, and it's going to automatically redo all of the settings that you just set up. So this is really useful if you do have multiple spreadsheets you need to bring in at the same time. All right, so now this is really starting to look like a good test case repository. So this is one of the features that really that Team Say really helps TestRail stand apart, is just kind of this nice organized setup here. So as we've got these different test cases that we created at the very beginning, these are brand new. We don't have these kind of organized into the same structure that we've got these other things in. So let's go ahead and move some of this stuff around. Now we can just kind of drag and drop. So if I want this top test case to be moved over into our login section, I can just drag it right into that section. As you'll see, it'll give me the option to move or copy. I can then also grab both of these at one time by checking the boxes, and we can move them over to this folder. I want to make sure they go into that messaging folder and then move there. So now that's going to give us a our full sections. We have our test cases organized. You can also drag and drop the folders directly. So if I want to create a have contacts be a subfolder of my login, we can do that here. So you can kind of very freely organize your test cases however you like as you're managing through as you're working through the system here. All right. So So let's start talking about how to execute your tests. So now that we're familiar with adding and organizing our test cases, we're going to jump into our test runs area here. And so first thing we're going to do is create a brand new test run. When you're creating a test run, you can give it a name. It's going to pre-populate just a very basic test run. Here's the date. So we're just going to say this is version 1.0 functional tests. All right, you can add references. This is going to tie into the secondary integration that we have set up with tools like Jira, or that we have set up, in different, along with different tools. There's, I think, 20 different integrations that we have configurable. So pretty much any project management tool that we have or that we integrate with, you can enter IDs here to link your test runs directly to kind of a user story or an epic that you would find in a separate tool. Milestones are kind of, as we mentioned earlier, just a very high level grouping of test runs that let you organize them by like a version release or something like a sprint if you're doing more agile development. So these are helpful for kind of organizing your test runs in a in a logical way that helps you plan for a specific release or just a specific time period. You can assign a full test run to a single user in your system, or if you're going to have a larger test run, you might want to leave it unassigned as a whole and then assign each test case individually as you get into the run. Down here, we can take a look at how to on what test cases we want to include inside of this run. So by default, it is going to include all test cases. But if we want to, we can also set it to select specific test cases. And here we can kind of go through each of our individual sections, choose which test cases we want to throw into these into this test run based on that. Or we can also go into the filtering on the right side here. And let's just say we are doing this as a functional run here. So let's go ahead and set our selection to all tests of the functional type. That should pretty much be everything. I think we've got these all set as functional for the moment, but let's go ahead and select all of those test cases. Down here, we do have another option for dynamic filtering. This is a beta feature. So if you do run into any issues trying it out, definitely let us know. But this is a way that if you say, with the filtering I just did, I created a filter for functional tests. If we're using the dynamic filtering and we go through and we add another new test case to our project's test case repository, and we set that new test case as a functional type, it will automatically be added to this test run. So if you edit or create new test cases that fall under the filters that you've created for your test run, it will automatically update to include those test cases. But let's go ahead and just add this run with all of our test cases selected here. All right. So one thing I did also want to mention there is if you've integrated your test automation with TestRail using the API, you may also create a second test run that you would use just to filter the automated tests that you've included in your automation test suite. Then as you run your test automation, you can have that automation system use the API to update each of the tests in TestRail, so you maintain a historical record of all of your automated testing and track the overall status of all of the testing efforts alongside the user acceptance or functional testing that you are doing manually inside this system. And then all of those test runs, both the manual and automated, would likely live inside of a single milestone for your specific version or sprint or however you're setting that up. So what does this actually look like when you start testing? So you can start off just with your really basic, we're looking at our test run here. This is all the tests that we've got to update. You can see all of our statuses. are just set to currently untested. If I want to add a test result, there's a couple different ways I can go about it. I can click into the test, view everything here, click add result, go through, and now I can kind of pass each individual step as we're going through. I can add any comments if I need to. This is the status of the test overall. So if I did have any issues with any of the individual steps, I might want to set this to blocked or to retest. I can also reassign the test to a different team member. So if I want somebody else to take a look at this test, if something is a little bit off on it, or I just need somebody to verify my findings, I can reassign this test to them here. I can also do things like use this elapsed field to kind of set an automatic timer for how long it's taking me to fill this in. On the test cases, there's also an estimate value that you can enter for how long you think it's going to take to run the test. And then these two values combined, the estimated and elapsed values, will allow you to kind of get a forecast of how long any test runs or test plans are going to take to run or should take to complete once they've all been set up and assigned to different people. This defects field is also part of our defect and requirement tracking integration. So we are integrated with Jira. You can use this in a few different ways. You can use the push, the add, or just kind of directly enter a value here. We'll get a little bit more into how that works momentarily, but let's go ahead and we're going to add this result. I did want to mention that I can, using this comment field, I can enter whatever information I want here. It does support Markdown. I can enter tables, I can embed images or GIF files there, or I can also just drop in attachments. So if there's any other files like a video file or potentially a log file or anything like that, I can use those as attachments and drop them into a test result to keep track of those as well. But we're just going to say that this test passed here. That's all good. Now let's go back to our kind of our general test run here. As you can see, as we're going through all of these, you will notice that this pie graph is going to kind of fill in real time, giving us those real-time metrics as we're working through things. So that was kind of the most manual way to add a test result. We can also go into this 3-pane view or fast track view that kind of gives us a little bit more information. We have kind of what I think of as just my testing to-do list sitting here on the left-hand side. That's all the stuff that I'm going to need to get through, and then just the details of the specific test that I'm working on. I can use the add result to get that same pop-up here. So if I want to just kind of fill in, I can click on, set all steps to passed. Kind of very quickly and easily get through that. We can start our our timer and everything as we're going and add a result there. If I'm looking here, if I don't really need to get too into the nitty gritty, this is just a really simple test. It's working right. I can just click on this pass and next down at the bottom, automatically takes me to the next one. We can continue to do that here. If I want to kind of defer this one, I might set it to retest. Now when we get to this section, let's just say that all of these tests, these are all very simple. We don't need to go through each individual facet of all of these. So we can just kind of quickly grab them all and then add results in bulk. So I'm just going to set all of these different test cases, or these different tests, to passed in one go. And that's working as expected. Now let's go into one of these guys down here. Let's say now when it actually comes time to send messages, we're trying to send these out to our recipient testers. When I'm going to set that up, I can do almost everything here. We're able to click on that, but when I enter a message and click the send button, they're not actually receiving it. So unfortunately, we do have a failed test here. Now you'll see that I marked this one step as failed. That did mark the overall status of the test as failed here. But now that we have a failed test, we are going to want to kind of figure out what to do from here. So we're going to push a new issue directly into our defect tracker. So, we've come across an inevitable bug. It can be really distracting to have to go over into Jira, log out, log the bug, type everything out about what's going on. So I'm going to enter my my comment here. If I wanted to add, screenshots or any other data, that's where I would add it here. And now I'm going to use this push function. And this is tied to the Jira integration. When I use this, it is going to pull up kind of my push dialog here. All of the fields you're seeing, this is all loading directly from Jira. So this is my summary field, which is essentially the title. Now, if I go into the project, I can choose what project in Jira I need to push this to. And we are going to set this as a bug issue type. Now we can update some of the other fields here that we have present inside of Jira. It's going to be highest priority. If I have sprints or epics or anything else that we do have linked to our current Jira project, then I can fill that in. This description field here is being filled in directly by the information that we have here. So this is telling me what test this actually is that is failing, what the title of the test is, and then a direct link to it that it's going to store inside of Jira. I can also see the no message received. That's the comment that I filled out here. What populates in this description field is completely customizable by your instance's administrators. So they can go in and set whatever details they want to include. That would include anything from the test case level and anything that's present inside of this add result dialog box. So if you want to see the results that have been added, each individual status of all of the steps, that can be set to populate inside of this description field. You can set all of the different fields that are present on the test case to be included in this description field. And you can also add your own custom text or just static text, or even the text that would be used for inline formatting inside of Jira. So if you wanted to add, header sections and that sort of thing, that you can do that to make these look really good when they do get pushed over to Jira. But let's go ahead and submit this new bug here. You'll see that it automatically fills in the defect ID inside of my my defects field in the test itself. Let's go ahead and add this result. Down here is where you can see the result. You can see the status of each individual step as it was done, and you do see the defect here. If I hover over this defect, it does automatically populate all of the details from that defect from inside of Jira. This is using the Jira API to get all of that information directly in real time. So if there had been any updates to this, I would be able to see it now. If I click on this, it's just going to take me right into Jira where we can view this bug. So we can see what's happening with it, who it's assigned to, and check it out here. I want to also, this section here does allow you to view TestRail results to linked tests, as long as you're logged into TestRail within the same browser. I think this is connected to a different TestRail instance, which is why it's not actually working as I'd like to here. But that said, we can go ahead and change this, this status to this issue. We're going to go ahead and set it to done. So that looks like it's ready to go. Now, if I'm back inside of my my test repository here, I hover over this, I can see, oh, okay, the status is now done. So this is ready for me to retest. And there's a couple different things I can do here. If I just want to retest directly inside of the existing run, I can go through and just add a new result into the test case here, and that will work as expected. Let's go back to our test runs. Now I'm just going to go ahead and quickly pass the rest of these. You'll see that this does show passed now. This is by default what shows on the overview page here is going to be the most recent version of the the most recent status that was assigned to this test. Since this test did have multiple results assigned to it, only the most recent result, the most up-to-date, is going to be what shows here. Let's go ahead and update these. We're just going to say that all of these test cases passed as well. But if we did want to say, let's grab a couple of these. We're going to fail 2 of them. And then let's go down and we're going to mark a couple of them as blocked as well. So rather than going through and actually adding new results to existing tests here, let's say we wanted to just kind of start over and do a brand new test run from this, we can use this rerun button here. So we've made some changes, it's time to start a new test run, but we don't want to grab everything. We don't need to retest every single aspect of these. All of these previously passed tests are fine. So we can go through and uncheck passed, but we want to keep all of the rest of these, all the blocked, untested, retested, and failed. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. This is going to be our next test run here. So it's creating just a duplicate test run, and it's only going to include the tests that previously were failed, untested, blocked, or set to retest. So none of the past tests were brought forward. And now we can double check that everything is working here and go ahead and add these results. And that's our second test run here. So if we go back to our test runs, we can see we did run into a little bit of an issue with our first test run, but after we went back in, retested everything, now everything's looking good. All right, so what I did want to really briefly highlight, all of the dashboards in TestRail are updated in real time. So you can quickly and easily answer questions like, what's the status on testing for this run? Have we tested everything? How many tests are passing? How many are failing? It does make it way easy to just kind of see at a glance what's happening with your different test cases. Once you've got the basic hang of the test case and test run workflow, everything from there is just more and more sophisticated and nuanced use cases depending on your specific situation. So you can use test plans to quickly set up multiple test runs using defined configurations, such as different operating systems or web browsers. And then you can also use the milestones, which give you a way to group your test runs and plans involved with a specific product release, sprint, or some other time-based initiative. Either way, the beauty of TestRail is that you can expedite all of the setup and administrative tasks related to planning and executing your testing to help you focus more on the most important work, actually doing the testing itself. All right, so I'm going to go back over to our slides here. So let's jump back over to this. Hopefully at this point you have a sense of how all of these various pieces fit together to build a holistic testing solution to track all of your testing efforts in one place. Revisiting this idea, we now know how to set up a project and then create the test cases inside, organize them into your different sections, and then create runs to record our execution data and organize those runs into test plans, and then track all of the testing for a given phase using milestones. So let's talk about the last piece of the puzzle, reporting and metrics. So the most direct way to view the metrics pertaining to the performance of your testing is on those in-app dashboards available when viewing your projects, milestones, plans, or test runs. If you need to share the information in a dashboard or the details of a particular round of testing with anyone outside of TestRail directly from those dashboards, you can generate a PDF of a full status report of one of those entities, of a run, a plan, or a milestone, just by using the print option. So if you're looking at your actual test repository here, I'm looking at my test run, I want to print this out to somebody. Again, just click print run. That's going to give me kind of this quick outline of everything. I can also switch this to details to get all of the specifics, every single step and every single aspect of it. And then when I print, just kind of quickly and easily save as PDF, and that way I can share it internally with other team members. Now, there are also a variety of built-in reports that help teams track most of the QA metrics that would be helpful for your teams. So it's tracking things like your testing progress out of the box using the summary reports. So you can get quick summaries of all of your milestones, your plans, your defects, different things like that. You can also cover traceability reports. So all of your different references that you've got tied to specific tools, or your coverage, what is your coverage for the references? This is really like a requirement coverage traceability matrix. So if you want to set all of the requirements are defined in something like Jira, and you need to make sure that all of the tests that you've got are doing that, you can use that kind of, if you define in the report what references should be present, the system will tell you which ones are available and which ones are not currently being tested against. You can also find reports like a workload summary by user that's going to give you how many tests are assigned to each of your different users in the system, how long the estimate is for them to eventually complete all of the work that's currently assigned to them, things of that nature. And there's tons more. These are just a quick sampling of some of the reports that are there, but there are many built-in reports available. Now let's talk about some of the customization options. So while the testing workflows are by far the most powerful part of TestRail, most teams also say TestRail was the right test management tool for them because of how customizable it is for their specific workflow. Almost every field inside of TestRail is customizable. You have the ability to define custom statuses for your tests and custom fields for test cases and results. So either globally or on a specific per project basis. You can change almost any field associated with a test case, add any new custom fields, and even change the base statuses. So things like your just basic past status, you can update that to suit your needs if you want to change the name or change the way it appears, down to the color of the label associated with that status. So you can make all kinds of changes there. One other super powerful customization element is the ability to add custom user interface elements and rules using UI scripts in TestRail. This is definitely a much more complex topic than we have time for in this webinar, but some of the most popular use cases for UI scripts are adding buttons to update a Slack channel with the current status of a test run, kick off a test automation run, or add Gherkin-style BDD text formatting to certain types of test cases. We will share a link to a repository with some common UI scripts and a link to the documentation in a follow-up email once this webinar is complete. User management is simple with custom roles and permissions that can be assigned to users. Fine-grained permissions ensure that every user only has the access they need, and you can define these roles globally or on a per project basis. TestRail comes with 5 default user roles out of the box, but you can edit those, remove and add to any of those roles in whatever way best suits your particular situation. As I mentioned before, TestRail integrates with more than 20 issue tracking tools out of the box. So there's lots of different options if you're using different defect or requirement trackers or project management tools. You can also integrate TestRail with any other tool or system, like your CI/CD pipelines or test automation. With TestRail's RESTful API, this way you can store test results from automation frameworks like Selenium, Ranorex, Robot, Cypress, PyTest, or whatever tool you use, or even CI/CD pipelines like Jenkins or Travis CI. If your organization is more security conscious or needs increased levels of support, TestRail Enterprise also supports integration with SSO identity providers through SAML 2.0, allowing you to connect with tools like Okta, OneLogin, Azure AD, or Google. And that helps you streamline access management with your existing authentication setup. It also comes with audit logs, more fine-grained administrative privileges, and priority support, including access to screen share sessions with our TestRail technical support engineers that can help you troubleshoot and triage any issues that you're experiencing. All right, so now it's Q&A time. That's going to do it for our main bit of presentation here. So let's see if we've had any questions pop in. Can you show one more time where we can start the test plan and within the test plan subfolders? Let's go ahead and jump over to how test plans work. So test plans are kind of a more like a larger version of a single test run where you have multiple test runs included. So let's go ahead and create. We're going to do test plan 1 here. And now you'll start off, and the first thing you want to do is add a test run. In this test run, we're going to include all of our existing test cases and update configurations. Yeah, now I have the add group button down here. Now I'm just going to set operating system as my group, and now I can add a configuration. So we're going to do Windows, we'll do iOS, do Android, and we can do Mac OS. And now, so I have this test run with all of my test cases in it. Let's go ahead and select all of these different operating systems. And now when I click OK, this is going to set up 4 sub test runs. So like 4 child test runs to this parent. All of the configurations are going to be the same. If I want to, I can change each of these individual test runs. So if there are any operating system specific test cases I need to make sure to include, I can do that here. But I'm just going to say that everything is how I want it to be here. Now when I click, I gotta redid that. Let's go ahead and add test plan. Now I have 4 different test runs inside of this one test plan for each of these different configurations, which can be really helpful, if I want to do a lot of parallel testing for all of the different versions of an application that I'm looking at one time. When creating a Jira defect from TestRail, is there a way to publish all the steps and expected result from the test case to that Jira bug so that other users who will be viewing the Jira bug do not need to navigate to the TestRail tool? Yes, so as I mentioned, there is a setup there for kind of creating your own custom templates. If I go into the integration section here, this is where I do have my integration with Jira defined. And this is all of the settings that I've got configured for it. Now down here, there's this option to enter a template for the description field of the defect dialog. By default, it is just populated with the comment that you would enter and then just the very basics of the test. That's just going to be the test title and the URL directly to that test. But if I go into this add field, I have my option of all of these different variables that I can include. And each of these is going to just kind of very quickly add, the variable, what that looks like. It's just this, % surrounded version here. I can also, so this is going to be, the test case, the value from the test case, and what it's pulling is the separated steps. So that's going to be exactly what we're looking for in this example. I can also add, as I said, like you can add, custom formatting, individual text. So if I want to do like comment, that's going to be comment. Using this H1, it's going to be like a header from inside of the Jira, using the Jira Markdown options. So you can add, if you want to italicize it or bold it, you can add those different kind of lines there, and add just, kind of all kinds of information here. Steps that were tested. So that's I'm going to save this like this. We'll make that make all these headers so you can kind of see what this looks like. Once I save the settings, now if I wanted to go back in and very quickly, I know we don't have a ton of time here, so let me go ahead and just add a quick result to one of these, and then can demonstrate what it looks like when I push now with those settings updated. So it does give me the H1 comment. Let's actually fill in a comment and go back to the push. So it is going to fill in the comment. We have all of our different details, and then here's the steps that were tested. It's giving me each step and expected result here. If I submit this, it gives me the defect in the system there. And let's go ahead and click on it and see what it looks like inside of Jira. So we do have our headers were saved here, so those are formatted correctly. This is bolden because I put it in the asterisk. And then we do have all of our steps down here. So there's a number of different ways you can set up those push templates. They can be really useful for kind of extending this integration. It's not just with Jira that you can set this up. Any tool that you're integrated with can use these push templates, however they support their own formatting there. Can you show us how I can export my test plan to an Excel or any other user-friendly format? Yeah, if you want to export, let's just say you want to export all of your test cases, it's going to be the same system either way. You're going to use this export cases button here. It's export to CSV or Excel. These are basically the same. Excel just has a slightly different header formatting, so it's a little bit different, but they're mostly going to end up being the same type of file. Let's go ahead and export to CSV. You can choose which sections you want to include. We're just going to include everything here, and then you can also include which steps you want to include. So you can pull all of the different or each of the different fields that you want to include inside of this CSV as a different column. Let's go ahead and export that and see. And this is what it looks like when sent. So now I have a CSV here that's ready for me to take a look at it. You can do the same thing with CSVs from inside of test runs or test plans. So if I wanted to export all of these, I can do that just using the same functions that we just went over. All right, and with that, I think we're kind of at time here, guys. I do appreciate everybody joining today. Thank you very much for being here. If you'd like to learn more about TestRail or check out some of the more advanced topics, I recommend checking out the webinars link that's currently on the screen. It's going to be www.gurock.com/testrail/webinars. You can find recordings of past webinars and sign up for future webinars on that page. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and start a trial of TestRail via the free trial link on our website. And thank you again to everyone, and we'll see you at the next webinar.